This is one of the most unfortunate stories I have never told. A young woman named Mary was at work one day when she got a phone call from her husband asking her to come home immediately, that his people, her in-laws, are waiting for her. It seemed as though this was an urgent family meeting that Mary wasn't aware of, and so she had to leave work early in a hurry to get home to see what the meeting was about. Unfortunately for Mary, on her way home, she was involved in a terrible accident that killed her instantly. When her family learned of her death, they were devastated. Soon afterwards, her burial was done in a rather sketchy way, but nobody thought of anything. Nobody saw it for more than it was a terrible accident, and life moved on. Now, Mary had 2 kids with her husband. Let's call him Joe. And after her death, Joe sends the kids to Mary's mother's house, to Grandma's house, to spend the holiday. Now, while the kids were at Grandma's house, something horrible happened and made everyone question whether or not Mary's death was truly an accident. They begin to suspect that she may have been murdered. Now, disclaimer. This is a true story. About 3 years ago, when we started this channel, I did not have enough equipment or knowledge as to how to go about telling stories that were not already in the blogs. A young lady reached out to me to request I tell her sister's story, and she went ahead to share everything that she knew regarding her sister Mary. She sent pictures, links, and she also gave me names. But I couldn't do it then because, first of all, the case was not on the blogs, and it involved a very serious allegation that could destroy someone and that could potentially land me into a lawsuit. Second of all, the case was in court at the time. However, the story was so haunting that every now and then it bothers me. I think about these stories. I think about the people in these stories. It's almost as though this story is haunting me, and until I tell it, I may never find peace. So, if you're a parent and you have kids, this story is for you. Another disclaimer, since it's been 3 years I was told this story, I've been unable to reach out to the young lady who told me. I could not find her Instagram anymore, and I could not find our WhatsApp conversation. Probably because I changed my phone. And so, the names I'll be using in this story are not the names of the actual people involved. And I will not be using images or video materials that represent the actual persons in this story. And again, if you are the lady who told me this story and you're still watching our channel, please reach out. Now, let's get into this story. So, Mary was married to a man, let's call him Joe. Together, Mary and Joe had 2 kids, a young boy and a young girl, both below the ages of 8. And also, Mary was the breadwinner of the family. She had a big job, a good one that pays the bills, the rent, the children's school fees, and one that feeds the house. Her husband Joe wasn't doing anything at the time. However, Joe did come from a seemingly well-to-do background. He came from a powerful family lineage. So probably money wasn't a problem for him, and he most likely did not need to do a 9 to 5, which meant that he would be home with the kids for the most part, leaving Mary to focus on her job. Now, according to the sister of Mary who told this story, who by the way has her own life, she remembers that one day Mary woke up and decided to quit a high-paying job. And everybody was surprised. They asked her why. Is your husband now getting paid more? Or were you tired of the job? Even her bosses at the job offered her a raise. But Mary said no, that she would not continue with the job because the job is time-consuming. She leaves early to work and closes very late. According to Mary, that job was keeping her away from spending time with her family, with her children especially. And after quitting that job, she settled for a lesser paying job, one that was closer to home and one that did not take so much of her time, which means she can afford to do this new job and still take care of her family, her husband's needs, and her children's needs. And apparently, this reason was solid. She was a mother after all. And if her first job is affecting her relationship with her family, then it makes sense that she would have to settle for something less. And it is possible that she may have also discussed it with her husband, who I presume was already getting tired of looking after the children for the most part and needed her to be present more often. Except that might not have been the case. However, one day when Mary was at her new job, she gets a phone call from Joe, her husband, requesting that she comes home urgently, that his people were waiting for her. This seemed like an urgent family meeting that Mary may not have been aware of, and so she had to leave her work very early to head back home to see why the family were there and what the meeting was about. According to her co-workers, she seemed bothered, she seemed disturbed. She appeared to be a shadow of herself when she left to go home. Unfortunately for her, on her way home on a motorcycle, Mary would be involved in a terrible accident that instantly killed her. She never made it home alive. When Mary's family heard of it, they were devastated. But it was an accident, an unfortunate tragedy. Soon afterwards, her husband Joe began the burial procession, and it did not take long after her death, Mary was put to rest. After the funeral, what was left to do was to heal and move on. The next holiday that follows the burial, Joe sends the two children, let's call them Kate and Philip. Joe sends the two children to Mary's mother's house, to their grandma's place, to spend time with them, while maybe he would focus on grieving. Now, when the children arrives at grandma's place, things seemed well. Maybe they were told, maybe they must have not been told about the death of their mother. It's hard on how to interpret that to children below the age of 8, where the youngest might have been 6 and the oldest might have been 8. The holiday was going well, until one day, Grandma decided to bait Kate, the girl child, and while baiting Kate, she noticed something was odd about a special part of her body. Grandma said whenever she was baiting this girl, she acted weird whenever it came down to her special part, and Grandma knew instantly that something wasn't right. This isn't ordinary, and immediately she takes the kids to the hospital and had the girl checked. Lo and behold, after her checkup, the doctor comes to tell Grandma that, I'm sorry, but your little girl has been assaulted. And Grandma was devastated. She did not know what to do. This was too much. This was shocking. And instantly she calls her children, Mary's siblings, asking them what she would have to do with this situation. And they too were surprised as to how Mary's daughter would have been SA'd and who would have done it. Then one of Mary's siblings suggested to Grandma to check the other boy, to run a test on him too. Grandma was apprehensive, however she listened, and the little boy was taken in for checkup. Lo and behold, the doctor comes back and tells Grandma that he too had been assaulted in his special area, and this was when Grandma knew that this was bigger than her. Grandma could not take it anymore, and so she had to ask the children, especially the boy who was older, who did this to you and your sister? Who touched you in these areas? And the little boy said, it was Daddy. Grandma froze. This revelation was something she knew was going to destroy the entire family. And instantly, she starts to wonder if her daughter actually died by accident. You see, when they got the news that Mary had died, the husband Joe did some sketchy things that at the time they did not understand. He alone planned the funeral without including Mary's family, and he would refuse them from going to the mortuary to see her corpse. In fact, they only saw Mary's body on the day of the burial, and they actually had to request for the casket to be opened so that they could see their daughter one last time before she's put in the ground. And when they did, that was when they noticed a huge gash on Mary's face, which they instantly believe may not have been as a result of a motorcycle accident. To them, it looked like someone struck her in the face with a big weapon, but after having learning that the children had allegedly accused their father of molesting them, they began suspecting that there was a chance Mary had known this, which would explain why she suddenly quit her job, a high-paying job, to settle for something less, just so she could be at home more to protect her kids. They also start to suspect that maybe Joe's family learned that the wife now knows about what he was doing to the kids, and they maybe wanted to shut her up or silence her And it could be that they most likely did. But there was no way to prove that the accident was some sort of setup for murder. No way to prove that. So after Grandma learns of what these two children were going through, she decided to take Joe to court, fighting to be the sole custodian of the kids. And her reasons being that their father was sexually assaulting them. However, when Joe learns of this, he put up a fight. The kids were sent to him for the main time while Grandma was going to court to fight for them so she could keep them. Joe had denied the allegations. Joe even went as far as accusing Grandma of being the one who came up with the whole debacle, forcing the children to lie, and even going to a hospital to pay the hospital to lie and give her fake results. But this was the court to judge, so Grandma left it for the court. Now, from this point on, the story gets blurred, because I never got to see it to the end. But from what I remember, Joe barely showed up in court. Remember, he came from a home and a family of people in positions who could do one or two things to his benefit. Barely showed up in court. It was only his lawyer, his uncle, and his aunties that were there. And the uncles and aunties and the relatives even threatened them in court to their face that nothing was going to happen to Joe, that this case would be thrown out, and even dared them to watch and see. This goes to show you that Joe did have powerful people on his side, and these people were willing to stand by him. Could it be they believed that Joe was innocent? Possible. Or could it be that they knew that he did it, but still wanted to keep him out of jail? As at the time I was told this story, the kids were still with Joe, and Joe had moved to a new area, a different place. He may have probably traveled out of the country with the kids. He never showed up in court at the time, and it was clear that Grandma was fighting people who appeared to be very powerful and influential. I also remember that the hospital that ran the test on the kids declined to testify in court. But then again, usually when these things are brought to court, the court usually provides their own medical examiners to examine the kids to see if they could come up with that conclusion. But I've heard nothing of this case. I don't remember it being on the blogs. At the time, it was one of those stories that faded into thin air. One of those stories that you had to read from a blog that the family could only reach out to. And so I'm assuming that was why Mary's sister reached out to me. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it then, given how sensitive it was. How damaging it would have been if the man's name and pictures had been circulating. How ill-equipped I was, because I didn't have lawyers then. I didn't have people to run me through how to present the story without getting in trouble. So I avoided it altogether, hoping that one day it would blow up on the news and I would get to talk about it. But that day never came, and I've never seen it on the news. And every now and then for the past 3 years, I've been haunted with this memory of the children being violated by their dad and having to get to live with that same man for the rest of their life, who clearly was not ready to give them up. By now, they should be grown up a bit, probably still living with their dad. However, it would be such a nightmare, one that I can only imagine. So I'm hoping the lady who told me this story gets to see this video, and hopefully we get to talk more on how this case might have progressed. So thank you guys for watching. If you have kids out there, please pay close attention to them. Sometimes it may not be dad. Sometimes it may not be their own siblings. You can never trust anyone completely. It could be anybody. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts on this story.